A very big hello to all our viewers. I am Nandini Sharma from the Center for Responsible Business, and at the Center for Responsible Business, I am leading the vertical on business and human rights. Today, we have with us a very special guest for an interview on the business and human rights agenda. A very engaging and a very interesting and insightful interview with none other than the Chief Sustainability Officer at JSW, Mr. Prabodha Acharya. Now, this interview, as you would have noticed by now, to our regular viewers, of course, that these interviews are curated and conceptualized as a part of a series of interviews that are being brought to you by the Business and Human Rights Network. And these are, of course, being conducted to bring out the industry perspective to all of you, to give you, insights into how the business and human rights agenda is evolving, shaping up, and what perhaps, in a layman's term, what perhaps it means for businesses, and how does one gear up for the future. So now, without any further ado, I would like to quickly introduce to all our viewers Mr. Prabodha Acharya, who has had a very illustrious career spanning over 30 years in the domain of sustainability. Mr. Acharya partners with CEOs, functional heads, senior executives and operation heads to develop and drive sustainability for the JSW Group companies of steel, energy, cement, paints, infrastructure, etc. And MTech in environmental engineering. He has worked for more than 3 decades in the field of corporate environmental management, emissions reduction, climate change, corporate strategy on sustainability and policy development across various sectors and geographies. He, of course, began his career with SAIL and since then has been working with many reputed organizations, and some of these, of course, include the Aditya Birla Group and the Lloyd's Register UK. And this is, of course, these stints, of course, have been in various capacities, following which he joined the JSW Group as the CSO. Mr. Acharya provides thought leadership through his capacity as the chairman of Climate Change and Energy Committee of ISA, vice chair of Climate Change and Environmental Subcommittee of ASSOCHAM, members of Climate Change and Circular Economy Committee of FICCI, member of Climate Change and Environmental Committee of CII, member of Environment Committee of World Steel. He is a professional lead assessor registered with IRCA, UK, and EPD verifier as per the international EPD system. Thank you so much, Mr. Acharya, for joining us today for this interview and for giving us your time today. So I'll hand it over to you for your welcome remarks.
First of all, thank you very much, Nandini, for such a detailed introductions. I also like to thank CRB, which is doing a fantastic work in the area of human rights and business and human rights. Thank you very much. Hello, viewers. I don't know whether I'll be able to do a justice the way Nandini introduced today, but I can possibly will provide a practical perspective from a business that how do I see business and human rights are becoming an integral part of the business strategies. Look forward, Nandini, to these discussions and thank you very much for listening to us.
No, thank you. It's an absolute pleasure, and I'm sure our viewers are keenly, looking forward to hearing every bit of information that they get from this interview. So without any further delay, I'll jump straight into our first question that we have for you. And this is, of course, really, how do you see as a, in being in the leadership capacity, how do you see the business and human rights landscape evolving? And particularly if you were to take a time horizon of 5 years, and of course, if you could share with us insights on how the landscape is evolving for the South Asia region, that would be wonderful.
Thank you, Nandini. I think it's a very important question, and I believe before we forecast, we need to retrospect that what has happened and how things are moved, because that gives I always tell that history gives a very good indications how the future keeps for you. And that is true for BHR also, that business and human rights issues. Since I am in this field, as you stated, that spent more than 30 years, when I look back, human rights issues are traditionally were looked by the industry as a drag, in the sense is activism. So they used to react. So over the period, specifically if I look back last 5 to 10 years, this conceptions and this perspective from the business has changed, and it has changed over time. Uh, you know, to becoming reactive by the business, now it is becoming proactive to manage these issues. The understanding of the business has started coming that this is something which we need to take care, which is good for business. Because if you understand any business they do, ultimately it is for the society. Now, if you look at in the JSW also, what is our motto? Our motto is to grow along with the society. So a business cannot grow in isolation with the society. And that is where the business and human rights issues are so closely linked with the progress of the business, and it is a realization of the business right now that it's good for the business. So therefore, if I have to now forecast that in the context of Indian context, because we have seen this happening globally, specifically Europe taking the lead, or US taking mostly Europe taking the lead in the legislative front. Nonetheless, in India also, in South Asia also, there are regulations which may not be directly called human rights regulation, but we have many indirect regulations and regulatory landscape, and there are good practices. Now, going forward in next 5 years or 10 years, if you see, this is going to be one of the important issue, and it is very closely linked with how the legislative landscape is changing. If you see for the organization how BRS are becoming important and mandated for the big companies, how the regulatory requirements with respect to human rights, specifically the labor issues, are becoming very important. And second thing, the way Indian economy is poised to grow with the limited land availability and limited resource availability, if the business doesn't handle the human rights issue proactively, it will become a force negatively affecting the business. The business cannot grow. So therefore, it is very important, as I stated, the business is realizing this is something to be part of my business strategy. It cannot be led to manage if there is a issue, if there is we have seen growing up looking at those Hindi film movies where there used to be always a protagonist working against the set. There is labor strikes, and then so those are 30 years before. Things have gone past. Now business is working with the society, working with the community, working with the labor forces that they are involved, because labor forces also getting intelligent, right? Everybody understand their right, but things are changing. A lot of issues which people were not able to understand, that now is becoming apparent. For example, climate change is becoming such an important issue. Nobody ever thought it is a basic human rights to have access to good quality of environment, or to mitigate the impacts. So these things are going to be center stage. So every aspect is now looked together. You can't look those separately. So in a sense, if I have to conclude, what's the perspective? It's a very good perspective. And I think we need more organizations like CRB to help business to understand this, and most importantly, help them to put the right strategy in place to manage proactively rather than reacting to the situation when it has gone out of control. But first of all, why people will be unhappy? People need to be happy, and their rights has to be addressed. Then only business can improve. That is the fundamental objective of the business, to contribute to the societal growth. It is no more only to look after only the shareholders' value. It is the stakeholder value that we need to look at. So yes, the perspective are very optimist, in the sense it is going to gain more and more importance in the boardrooms with the business strategies, and it has to. It's good to have.
Thank you so much for that response. I think the coverage in terms of the response, right from, I think that was a very important point that you made, right from the historical perspective, how, India has, specifically engaged on the topic of human rights. And it's not, a 1 year or a 2 year story. This goes back 10 years, and how we have national frameworks, like you mentioned, the BRSR, the NGRBC. So I think, and we have also, in that sense, the agenda has evolved and matured, and I think now, like you mentioned, that businesses definitely do, especially the progressive one, definitely understand that their survival, like you mentioned, depends on it. And the other aspect I thought that you brought out of the interconnectedness, that while there is that emphasis on the climate part, and perhaps it's more tangible in terms of addressing and sort of computing and putting data or figures to it, the social aspects perhaps are in that sense a little more difficult. But that interlinkage is seeing environment as a human right is also, I think, growing and needs to grow. So thank you so much for that response. My next question is, and I think you've sort of kind of given a little bit of, already sort of responded to it in the previous question, which is, what do you think would be some of the important areas going forward for businesses, in terms of really being able to adopt and integrate, business and human rights? So what kind of support or hand holding would a business typically need?
I think the business need lot of support at this moment. I see we are in a transition from, as I stated in earlier response, from being reactive to become proactive. We are in a transition. So when you are in transition, it is very fundamental to manage those transitional issues. So to address any transitional issues, what is needed is to understand. To first of all, to recognize that the human rights issue is a business issue and it should be part of your business strategy. So that understanding and awareness is very much needed, which is happening. So therefore, it boils down, a lot of training needed. See, when I say why, one aspect I told, it is becoming proactive, and again, I'm telling there is a need of training, because it is not about boardroom becoming aware, or it is not about having a regulatory requirement in practice such legislation in place. It is all about having all hierarchy of your organizations being aware that how it is impacting to their own operations, own functions. For example, HR. When you develop HR practices, how that is taking care of the human rights issue of your own workforce plus the community. Or when you develop a philanthropy or CSR strategy, how you take care of those basic needs, the just transition need, the social complexity which might come because by introducing business, you are changing the fundamental. So therefore, the training and hand-holding is very important. And believe me, from my own experience, I can tell you, it took me some time to really understand what exactly we need to become proactive and do a right policies and practices to handle the human rights issue. So this understanding need to be there. So that is where I told we need more organizations or more capabilities within the CRB to train people across to people like us or who are in the business and in the different functions. Operations has an impact, finance has an impact, maintenance has an impact. So every marketing, sales, everybody, we have an impact. So how do you understand? So understanding, capability building. Second thing, increasingly the compliance is increasing. As we become sophisticated, as the society progresses, as the economy grows and matured, more and more such regulations is going to come. And most importantly, the enforcement is going to be more stricter. And it is a phase everybody passes. So understanding again your compliance requirement and making a strategy to comply the regulatory requirement, that's where the business need handholding. But the most important thing I will say, there is something called human rights impact assessment. and human rights due diligence process, HRDD. Believe me, it took more than 5 years for me. I'm still trying to understand from experts like you what it entails and how to do a systematic human rights impact assessment and human rights due diligence, because that's the fundamental based on which your strategy will be built. So we need more and more professional in this field to do a scientific impact assessment and draw a scientific due diligence so that the management plan and strategy can be built. So that is where more and more need is there. The other important area which we have started realizing is that as a business, you are not insulated from your supply chain. So until and unless you see the business as a whole, your supply chain, both downstream and also upstreams, you cannot really be successful. So bringing supply chain into your business and human rights due diligence process is another important issue. To recognize that and what it needs to be done, that is where possibly business needs some handholding and understanding. As such, we are still trying to understand the real impact of the supply chain. Thanks to COVID, it made very apparent that how the business can get disrupted if you have not handled your supply chain's resilience. And I see the human rights issue can be a resilience issue, can be a strategy issue. So therefore, it needs to be ingrained in your strategy of developing and managing your supply chain. So that is one of the other area where possibly the business need handholding. The last one, we must understand that every country, every region has their own nuances because of the cultural sensitivity, because of the context. So therefore, I mean, this I have faced as a person also, when you would deal with people talking about human rights in Europe or UK and talking about India or in China, so the context changes, the sensitivity changes. So you need to realize and then accordingly develop your strategies, or accordingly you need to understand what the context is. So those sensitivity need to be understood and need to be factored in. And so therefore, everybody in the ecosystem, including business, consultants, human rights associations, NGOs, everybody need to factor in when dealing with business and human rights implications. So those are the areas I would think that is required to provide some handholding, to provide some support so that we can do better than what we are doing.
Fantastic. I think this is such a comprehensive response to the question, and the way you've sort of said how it starts with the understanding, sort of then building it into policies and practices, etc. So I think thank you so much for that response, and of course thank you for your kind words. CRB is here, the Business and Human Rights Network, a CRB initiative. We are all here to exactly do this, to provide that support and handholding, the businesses through their BHR journey. So thank you so much. My next question is probably a little more focused, and I think you've already sort of alluded to some aspects of it in your answer. So let's say if there were a business that wanted to embark on its business and human rights journey, what would be some of the key areas or key processes, topics, issues that perhaps it could look at first? So the key areas for businesses that they should sort of take on to stay competitive, to stay ahead of the curve, or to even embark on their business and human rights journey.
Thank you, Nandini. I think you are right. Part of things I have already answered. For example, as organizations, you should have a basic policy, what you want to achieve. And then you should have a basic strategy. You should have a impact assessment. You should have a due diligence process. But those are strategic level or system level elements which as a business one has to have, because there is no point jumping randomly without having an objective. So these things will give organizations where and how to move. But besides that, if I have to really focus on the key areas. Of course, this focus will change if I'm building a manufacturing facility in a green field, or I am running a brownfield operations, or I am into a service organization. So naturally, the nuances will be different. So therefore, the policy impact assessment due diligence process will give those insights about how you go ahead with the strategy. Because we are into manufacturing facility, so if I have to call out some of the important need to focus, I'll start with first possibly how we deal, if it is a field, start how we deal with the people who are there. That's the community, right? How do you build that community relationship, and what do you want to give them back, not that what you take in return, taking into aspects of all the basic human rights are existing in the law of land, but most importantly, how you go beyond that. That's in the green field. But in the brown field, after you have the plant, obviously you have to deal with your people. Maybe some community becomes an important part of your day-to-day operations. So therefore, labor rights and working conditions comes very important. Because see, if I am not happy to come my work, I will not give my 100% to the business. So therefore, it is very important that how do you take care of those labor rights, how to take care of the working conditions of the people who are coming to your factory. We always say, happy persons coming to your business will give you more than unhappy persons coming to your business, right? So make them happy. Ensure that you go beyond the basic needs. Second element is how do you put the non-discrimination, diversity, and inclusiveness as a part of DNA, because that will again it is not only handling the human rights issue, it's going beyond and making them inclusive. Everybody thinks taking the ownership, because ultimately we have to run a business in a profitable manner. So therefore, these elements will help you. Freedom of expression and privacy. See, this freedom of expression, if you see, Indian businesses are in a better footing because we Indians know known to be outspoken. But nowadays, let me see, the privacy, data privacy, information privacy is becoming so important. And how as a business we handle them is a key area. We talked about the supply chain management. I cannot really focus much about the importance of supply chain management and taking proactive approach to manage the issues, human rights issue in the supply chain, which is very important. Land rights and community issue is going to be one of the another important issue as we grow, because we know India is growing, economy is growing, so therefore industry will grow. There will be and we have a limited land mass is available. So there will be always conflict between what you can do with that land available, because we can't grow the land which is available to us. So we have to make the best use of it, taking account of that the human rights issues are well addressed or beyond. We have done beyond that. So how do we manage that? Specifically, if you see, Nandini, the way we are now moving in the energy transition, if I link, the renewable energy is essentially solar fields are requiring more lands, and therefore you will find increasingly it will be difficult to manage the human rights issue, the basic needs of the farmers, and the productivity of land, and then the requirement of energy transition. We have seen that in JSW. We are putting a solar plant there. We found, see, the farmers will lose the productivity and there will be a food issue. So we increase the height of the solar panel so that the cultivations can happen down below, and the farmers will have a right to have the access, even though we have they have sold the land, but still that's their main livelihood. So although there is a little bit of cost aspects when you increase the structure and build higher structures, but then we consciously took that into our decisions and ensure that it doesn't create future problems in terms of food security. So we need to think little ahead when we deal with land rights issue and community engagement issues. Of course, environmental responsibilities, both without saying, that is becoming important. So those are the key areas where I see that the business needs to focus and think beyond or anticipate and work.
Fantastic. Great. I think this will be most useful for, I think, businesses of all size, shape, geographies. I think, and I think, some of these issues that you mentioned, working conditions, labor right, climate, community development, all of these, I think, cannot be overemphasized, and the need to sort of also, like you said, have an elevated sort of or a higher thinking or a more mature thinking or a long term thinking in that perspective, I think is critical. And I think it sort of ties back then to how you strategize and how you make those policies and policy commitments, and how you're sort of reviewing them and monitoring them, and then of course reporting on them. So thank you so much for that response. My last question, Mr. Acharya, to you, and this is probably a lot more personal because I'm going to be talking about JSW. So I think we'd all be very interested in knowing what were some of the key motivating drivers for JSW to take up the BHR agenda a lot more strongly, with a lot more sort of focus. And maybe if you could also share some of the good practices that JSW follows, which perhaps would be insightful for some of the viewers.
Thank you, Nandini. I think I started in the beginning first answering question that JSW's our objective is to grow along with the growth of the society. So it is a fundamental and natural DNA with JSW to work with the basic needs and grow with the society. When you want to grow with the society, you cannot overlook human rights issues. We do a lot of things, but what's my main driver? See, you have to understand at the end, we are into a business also. So when we want to grow with the society, means society should get benefited, but at the same time, JSW need to grow. So we need to grow. Then what are the things as a business? You have to look at what are the opportunity available and what are the risks to be mitigated. So both the things are needed, right? Opportunity is tremendous because when you take care of your people, when you take care of your human rights issues, you get a contempt and competent people, not only in your factory, but around your operations. And that is where we have also seen that it is better to demonstrate because seeing is believing. And there are certain cases that happened earlier in some of the greenfield projects where people were not really convinced that what kind of development is going to happen. We have taken those people to our existing facilities. For example, in Vijayanagar, we have a comprehensive facility and shown them that what this land was and what it is now. So people see and then believe. So again, the main benefit is that you will have a business growth if you take care of human rights issues. But besides that, if you look at there are many other factors which is affecting. If you, for example, regulatory compliance, there are a lot of compliance issues are increasing. So therefore, it is essential also to do that. Talent management, to get right people. Business rights, and when you have a good system and processes, it helps to manage your talent. Investor expectations has increased. When they look at investing in your company, they don't look at only how much profit you make. They look at all these issues, including human rights issues. How do you handle those? And this is becoming very important. So if you don't take care of that, so you're not going to get money to expand and increase your business. Customers have started demanding also. They want to understand what's happening. The entire value chain management. Forget about I asking my supply chain to comply. My suppliers are asking me also to comply to higher expectations of human rights. Because, we are in a business which is international in nature, both in the raw material supplies and also the upstream value chain customer expectations. So it is both the ways. So that is also one of the things which is going to help. And I cannot really emphasize much on having a positive stakeholder relations. Basically, you want to build a brand, and your brand is built over a period of time, and it is not built on the negative sentiments, it's built on the positive sentiments. So to build a positive sentiments, you have to ensure that you are not missing any element, which is obvious you will address, but how do you know that you are not missing any element? And that is where, and that is why possibly we are doing a structured way of impact assessment and due diligence process. And we have realized, and thanks to CRB for helping us doing that, and I am sure that he will help us in doing in all our operations and bring in those best practices across the globe, and that will help us that we are not missing anything, which is ultimately, you will known as a responsible organization and responsible business. Therefore, you will grow, and you will ensure that society is growing. Thank you.
Fantastic. I mean, this was my last question, but I must already say that it's been an absolute delight speaking with you, Mr. Acharya. I think it's been a very enriching experience, and some of the key takeaways. I mean, there are so many key takeaways from this particular conversation that we've had with you, and really, sort of taking us through JSW's sort of journey in that sense, on how they kind of have adopted and integrated business and human rights, and of course the way you are sort of encouraging the supply chain actors also to sort of adopt and integrate this. I think the last bit that you mentioned on the stakeholder engagement bit, which is really, I think, the deal clincher in that sense, that if it really all hinges, the human business and human rights agenda at the end of the day really hinges on, or the central aspect is to have that stakeholder engagement, to be able to be all inclusive, to not, like you said, miss out on any element in that sense. So I think thank you so much for your time and sharing these valuable lessons with us. For our viewers, of course, only, of course, a request to all the viewers is that, please join the Business and Human Rights Network for more of these insights. There is a whole repository or a wealth of knowledge that we've curated for all of you all to access, so as to encourage a better understanding of business and human rights, and to sort of enable businesses to better integrate and adopt business and human rights tenets. So with that, thank you so much to everyone who's watching us, who's been a part of the BHR network, and we hope to bring you more of this interesting and engaging content. Thank you.